Okay, we're gonna take apart this 1971 Honda CT90 or Trail 90. This is a K3 motor. I had it all put together, ready to put on my last cover, and realized I had missed one of the locating dowel pins in between the two case halves. So let's make a little video. Maybe this will help somebody in the future when they're taking apart theirs or have some questions. So first thing we're going to do is take off the sub-transmission cover, which you can see I've already started to pull some of these off, and we'll go over which bolts to use where when we reassemble. 4 bolts for that, and then this plate should just slide right off. There's a gasket that goes here. We'll put it on later. Don't remove these or else you'll find yourself in the same situation I'm in. All right, and then remember, take note as you're taking things off, especially on this guy. This shaft has a pin on the inside. You can see right there, that needs to go in the case. So what I like to do is just take it off, and I'll set these gears just as they come out. We'll just try and set them back in the housing like that. We've got a little circlip right here we need to remove. You want to be careful not to drag that across these splines here and scratch it all up. And then this last gear has a washer. Hopefully you guys can see that. Has a washer, and then we can pull this gear off. So I'll set that aside. Usually I'll put all this stuff into a Ziploc bag and label it, but since I set it aside. Okay, next, we don't need to remove this. If you want to, you can pull this clip out here. This will slide out. There's a little O-ring on this shaft that keeps the oil from spilling out the bottom, but I'm not going to take that off. All right, next, we'll do the left side of the case. Okay, then this should just pop off. You don't want to force these, and certainly you don't want to take a screwdriver and pry. You ruin your mating surfaces. So we can see this locator pin came out of here. I'm going to put it back, and I got the other one there. And then this will just slip right off like that. And that's it for this side. I'm a little bit nervous about that. So let's turn it over. Take off the right side again. Take this off. In my case, this is a 14 millimeter. This is the clutch adjustment bolt. that off. You got a little washer behind it, and this should pop off. Also a little O-ring on this shaft here, so don't lose that. Okay, I couldn't remember. So it looks like you do not have to remove the clutch adjuster nut. You can keep that on if you want. Put all these here. And we can start to disassemble this. Just remember, everything that comes off, try and keep it in its order. You got the this little ball plate, a spring. There we go. Just try and keep this all in an assembly. And I'll set it down here on the side. You can take this off. If you need to, you can get a penny and jam it in the gears. I've got this little tool here that will help me keep my clutch in place while I work on it. So you remove the clutch cover plate, and this bearing will come out too, so be careful not to lose it. Just try and keep that on there. And then to unlock this, you'll need a special tool. Looks like this. Do it the easy way. Take off the whole clutch pack. I'm not going to take this apart, but if you were to change your clutch plates, now would be the time. Little circle up here. And this will slide off. I'll take this off. I believe this is a like a shift stopper arm or something like that. I don't know the names for all of it, but so when you take this off, be careful because it's spring loaded. You don't want to lose all your stuff. Again, what I like to do is just lift it off the way it goes, set it all back down together so I know how it'll go right back in. We gotta take this guy off. This can only go on in one direction. And these pins that you can see here, these will all fall out if you're not careful. So don't put this back together if these pins are not where they're at, and try and just not move them. And then you can take this assembly out and it'll slide up. So at the end of the day, you want this little hole, send it down here, so this will be over this post right here. Just like that. And then these teeth will catch in to teeth inside this shift drum. I'm not going to take off the oil pump, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Looks like, well, we got 6 bolts here. Let's take them off. There'll be a little gear in there. Remember how you take it off, put it back together the same way. Take off this little oil collar, this collar, and this oil. Well, might as well take them off, why not? Okay. So this side's ready to go. Take off, what's this called, a stator? It's 14mm as well. You probably want to take this off before you take the clutch off, because I think you need to, if you don't have an impact, because you will need this to stay steady. Okay. Here we go. All right, you got a little plastic C clip. You see how that goes in just around this wire. Couple little, those will just slide right out. And there you go. All right, so I'm not going to take off my flywheel. Take off this cover here. Just unscrew these 2 screws. They got little washers on them. And then this plate will just slide right up over like that, and we'll talk about this when we reassemble. This will just slide off, just like that. And what I'm going to do is just thread these back in so we don't lose them. It's worth noting here too, and maybe we'll talk about it again, this section has aluminum crush washers that will help keep oil out of this section. You don't want any oil where your points are running through. So make sure that you have those crush washers in this area. 2 bolts on this one. Some I've seen with 3. And then this will allow you to pull out the cam, set it aside. I believe it's advised to loosen these in a pattern that's somewhat of a crisscross. So we can pull the head cover off. All right. You can take this cover off if you were to be replacing your valves or doing any valve work. Take off these caps. I'm not going to do any of that today. 3 screws right here. Hold this plate on. Spark plug. So then what you'll want to do is this head should come off as an assembly. Again, take off this. Here. Now we can unscrew the rest of this cam chain slider. Another crush washer. There'll be some oil passing through there, so you don't want any of that to get out. We'll just put those together. Pull this off. And then I can take off my cylinder. You should be able to split these cases. So this should just slide up. You can see that's already come apart a little bit. The tricky part is this bearing binds to the case, which is fine. So interestingly, I thought I had missed one of these too. I should have checked here because it looks like I actually missed one on the head, or on the cylinder. So either way, I guess you build your own engines, you make your own mistakes, you got no one to blame but yourself. At this point, you can remove your gear stack. Take note, there's a washer. You can see it got stuck to this side of the case that goes right here. Very easy to lose. My recommendation would be take all this out. I'm not going to be able to pull this out because I did not there's a bolt on the other side of this barrel that I did not unscrew. Let's show it to you. You'll want to unscrew this guy right here. That'll allow you to pull your gear stack out. So you pulled it out, let's reassemble the engine. So if you were to completely take out your crank, take off your flywheel, be able to take out your crank. Then what you'd want to do, come in, set your gear stack in, set your crank in, and as you switch your gears, they're all good. Okay, let's put it back together. I like to make sure my mating surfaces are dry and clean. Okay, so we put in our gear stack. If we're reassembling, put in our crank, our bearings are on our crank. We want to put in the kickstart mechanism on this side. So it'll just slip through this hole. Your spring, this is a stopper here, this spring will wrap around and go right into there. And then as far as this side of the case, just make sure you got your bearings, and you want to lube up any contact surfaces. Like right here is the other side of the oil pump, and right here your gears are going to spin on that and this. So I've already just put a dot of assembly lube in there so that it gets whatever it needs. And I also like to keep a bottle with just some regular motor oil that I can squirt on a few things as well. Like I might squirt them on this just to make sure they get a little bit. All right, let's clean this up again. Let's get it putting back together. Make sure you got your two dowel pins in, gear stacks in, crankshafts in. You don't need this in quite yet if you're doing a full tear apart. Kickstart mechanism's on, dowel pin. Just bring it over the top. We'll let those slide down together. And then because check your gasket, make sure you're not okay. So that went in nicely. I've got new bolts for all these. These are 40 millimeter M6 bolts. And I'm switching mine over to a hex head or an Allen wrench head, so that they will hopefully be a little bit more user-friendly in the event that I've got to open this up again. They don't give a torque specification in the manual for these. They just say recommended tighten them in a crisscross pattern until hand tight. So I'm going to probably set them at like 5 foot-pounds. General rule of thumb is use one of these small ratchets and bring it down snug with one of these. That way you don't have enough leverage to really over tighten them drastically if you don't want to use a torque wrench. Another note, this oil screen, if you're going to install it, if you're going to take it out and clean it, when you install it back in, there's a thin side and a thick side. Make sure the thin side goes down and the thick side is right here. Okay. All right. So then let's flip this over. You'd want to install this bolt, the gear stack bolt. I've got that at 6 to 9 foot-pounds. And then take note on this guy. There may be a curved side to one of the washers, or to the washer, a curved side and a flat side. You want the curved side to be against the case because this bolt does spin a little bit. Then we can just flip it back over. We'll install this. This is the shift drum stopper plate. I've got no torque spec for it. And then, like I said before, this can only go on in one slot. So once that pin lines up with that detent, then you just line up the hole, and there it is. I'm going to put some more Loctite on this, I guess, because why not? And there is no torque spec given for this. So in a second, I'll tighten that down a little bit more. Back on our shift assembly. If you recall, this little groove here needs to go over this post. And then this will slide under and lock into there. Keep that in place. Next up, let's see, shift assembly. Again, this spring on. Set that into place, and remember your bolt. So when this is coming on, just give it a press back with one hand and thread it on, and that it'll slot itself in. It's got a little shelf type thing that it needs to get into. Just like that. And it looks like this is 10 millimeter. Again, I could find no torque spec for that, so just a good hand tight with this small ratchet. Make sure it works. Everything moves. Okay, let's install the drive gear. Circlip. Wrong ones. Okay. Install a clutch pack. I knew I shouldn't have took those off. Told you guys. Should have just left them on. Didn't need to take them off. All right. Clutch pack, slide over top of that. There we go. So there's splines on that. Okay, let's put that lock washer back on. Lock nut. Get out the old clutch holding tool. So this clutch plate lock nut torqued to 28 to 33 foot-pounds. So what you want to do here is just take it right to 28, and then if it doesn't line up, with one of these tabs to be able to lock it in, then you take it tighter until one of the tabs lines up. I'm going to call that good. This one, where'd my dumb screwdriver go? This one is just so close. There we go. Okay. Clutch cover plate. No torque spec for these screws. Bearings on. We actually do want to flip over here before we get too far, now that I'm thinking about it, because we want we're going to need the stator on. So you got the wires, got your rubber grommet things, they'll go in each of these slots. This guy will just go down this hole. Just going to be gentle with it all. It'll make itself at home. There we go. All right. You remember this C-clip, it just fits right over that, around that wire. Those are both into place good. Again, these don't have a torque spec. I'm already regretting my decision to put that right side cover on because I need it off to be able to set this rotor bolt. We'll golly. Okay, let's see. Rotor bolt 19 to 23 foot-pounds. Install the clutch release mechanism. Does this set up here? We put the cover back on this side. Okay. Let's talk about these bolts. Okay. So this one and this one, these two are 32 millimeter M6s, and the rest are 20 millimeter M6. Again, these don't have a torque spec, so we'll just do them to the 5 foot-pounds. Okay, as far as initially setting your clutch adjustment, what you want to do is turn this screw counterclockwise until you can feel resistance, and then back it off 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn, and then take note of the position there. You don't want to tighten up this one and make sure that that inner bolt doesn't move. Okay, I have lost sight of the cam chain. You want to install that over the gear. Let's see if we can get you better. Right into the middle here again. So there's a gear around your crankshaft underneath your flywheel that will hold the cam chain. Then it also needs to thread onto this that will run your oil pump. So if we're starting to install this engine from the beginning again, you'll have this ring that goes on, and you'll install these 3 screws, 1, 2, 3 with the tabs. Slide in your oil gear. Make sure it seats in with the oil pump. On the other side, there's a little tab that it just slots right into. You can put this little plunger on. So in here is just the plunger, a spring, this crush washer, and the bolt. And this will allow this cam chain to have more or less tension with the oil flow, I believe is how it works. Put on your flywheel. I don't have a flywheel puller or installer, so didn't need to take it off anyways. So you would put that on, run your cam chain out, then put on your piston, wrist pin, and the clips to hold the wrist pin in. Your rings go as follows. Your oil ring and you'll have a black, kind of like a graphite or something type colored ring, and then maybe a shiny ring that goes on top. I believe the manual says they don't care where these gaps are, your ring gaps, just as long as they are. So we'll put that one down here. We got the second one over here, and then our oil gap is there on top. So they're just basically, we're going to space them evenly apart. So now we'll put our cylinder on. Okay, we will make sure that our dowel pins are actually in this time. Get a gasket here. It just slides into place right there. This will go over top. I don't know if it's totally necessary in this application. I'm going to bring that gasket back up over my dowels. And then before you get too excited about this, make sure your cam chain is coming up through here. You'll want it. Now, we can put in our cam chain roller. This guy's torqued to 6 to 10 foot-pounds. You can see that's not very much. Now, install the head. So what you'll want to do is put this gasket in. Take note, we did not, oops, we did not remove, there is a locator pin here, and it also has a rubber O-ring. So this one's a little bit longer. I believe it's a 10 millimeter. And a little rubber O-ring that goes over top of it and slides on. So I had lost this earlier, so I purchased another one, and then I found it. So, all right. So when we're going to put this head on, we're going to be mindful of a few things. Make sure as you look in here that your cam chain is set up around the gear, on your crankshaft, on the teeth for your oil pump, on your lifter, and then around your roller. Then you want to rotate your crankshaft counterclockwise until this mark lines up with the T, which coincidentally we can maybe see that our piston is at top dead center. Then we want to get this We want this O to be pointed straight up. It will ultimately meet up with this notch right here. Like so. All right, so we need to put our best attempt of getting that to be straight up as we can be. Well, this is a top dead center. Then we can try once again to install this head. I'm going to use a dab of assembly lube on this gasket to keep it in place while it is upside down and I'm sliding the head on. And then once that's in place, you know the drill. Head on, apply directly to the forehead. Make sure that that roller stays where it's supposed to, your gaskets stay where they're supposed to. Your fingers are going to get smashed like they're supposed to. Everything looks good, lines up. Perfect. Now, we need to install our camshaft. And I can tell already that I am off. Let's see if we can get that. So I'm here at top dead center, but I am off one tooth on my chain. So I need to just give that a little slack and we'll rotate the chain around once. Lift it one tooth and now my mark is lined up there. Now I know I can set the proper timing for the motorcycle. What I'm going to do now is apply a bunch of assembly lube on this camshaft. You want this pin to be pointed up. And you can just make sure you slide it in. We'll get these down. It'll fall into place and then you can rotate it up to match up with your screw holes. All right, so now our cam sprocket bolts, 7 to 9 foot-pounds. Install the head cover, 14 to 18 foot-pounds. Okay. We need to install the ignition advancer. And this guy. And this back. We can slip on our ignition advancer. That little notch will line up with the notch here. You'll feel it just drop into place. This should spin and move freely. Very easy. This is a brand new unit, so it's perfect. Then this gets put on at 7 to 9 foot-pounds. Perfect. Okay, let's set the timing. First, set the motor at the top dead center mark. Set this plate on so that the mark, this mark lines up with this mark here on the case. And then we're going to use that as a starter reference point. We will lightly set these screws with the washers that hold the plate in place. We need our feeler gauge. So what we want to do to start is, and I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but one side of this mechanism has a flat side, and as the motor turns, this portion will eventually fall into the flat side, closing the gap on the points here. So what we want to do is make it so that once we hit the largest gap, which should be right after the flat spot, we want to send our feeler gauge in. We want to see if this gap between these 2 points is at 0.3 to 0.4 millimeters. Here's a 0.4. Can almost get that in. Here's a 0.3. And that slides in with just a little bit of resistance. So, if your gap is too large, you need to unscrew these 2 screws. Use a flathead screwdriver. Unscrew them lightly, and then put your flathead screwdriver right there in that, and you can gently move your points further or closer from each other until you hit your desired gap, which I already have. Then what we want to do is bring our motor back to top dead center. We need to set our timing. In order to do that, I've created via other people's ingenuity on the internet, a light, a timing light. Basically, it's just a Harbor Freight light, and you interrupt from the battery to one end of the light with two wires. One of them will get plugged in to this. The other will be grounded, and I'll just ground it right here underneath that. All right. So we can see that the light is on. What we want to do is rotate this counterclockwise, and once this line lines up with the firing line, the light should shut off. So it hasn't shut off. You can see I need to adjust this plate forward or backward to make it so that this line lines up with this. So how do you do that? Since these screws are sort of gently set in there, you take your screwdriver and you rotate this plate in a direction. So let's rotate it this way. We were turning off too late. Now let's see. So our light's back on. Better, but not quite. I don't know, maybe we're actually getting worse. Let me run it the other way. All right, so look at that. We should be able to see that as soon as we get that F, the light turns off. So we'll go ahead and tighten that down. And our static timing should be set. Okay. Now we'll install the cover. So this will slip in into the seal. Just like that. Put the cover on. All right, this guy has several different sizes. 25mm are going to be most of them. Looks like we got a 18mm, or not an 18, 40mm at the top, 40mm here, and a 45mm in the middle, and then a 35mm down here. Sorry, 45mm, 40mm, 35, and the rest are 25s. Again, no torque spec given, so I'm going to set them to 5 foot-pounds. Put these covers on. This guy, there's a hole to run it up through there. Okay, let's install the sub transmission. Start with the gear, washer, circlip, put that all the way down. You might need to pull up on this shaft just a little bit to get that to slide down and seat. All the way around, there we go. Perfect. Next, the gear assembly, shift fork, gear. Remember, we want to put this down in, slides in. Make sure that you line up your shift lever with this bottom part here. And there we go. There we go. It's all in. Gasket. Cover. So this is going to take a 40mm and the other 3 are going to be 30s. We'll finish up. This gasket, or this plate, has some screws with little rubber O-rings. Looks like I missed on this stud. I believe I'm supposed to have this bolt. I'm supposed to have